It was one of those October evenings in Oregon when the light turns to gold before it dies soft, calm, deceptively peaceful. From my porch overlooking Crystal Lake, the world looked like it was holding its breath. The water was still. The pine trees mirrored perfectly in its glassy surface, not even a ripple breaking the reflection. I had just poured my tea and set the cup on the wooden railing when I saw headlights cutting through the trees. At first, I didn't think much of it. The dirt road by the lake was rarely used except by fishermen, but the way that white SUV moved fast, reckless, out of control, made my stomach twist. The tires screeched when it hit the gravel bend, kicking up clouds of dust. My first thought was that someone was drunk or running from something. Then I saw her. Lara, my daughter-in-law, my son Evan's widow. I hadn't seen her in weeks, not since she skipped the memorial dinner for Evan 6 months after the accident. She stepped out of the SUV like a ghost that had forgotten how to breathe. Her hair was a mess, her face pale and wet, as if she'd been crying for hours. The gray dress she wore clung to her legs in the damp wind. I froze. Something in my chest told me not to move, not to call out, just to watch. Lara went to the back of the car and opened the trunk with violent force. That's when I saw it, a brown leather suitcase. The same one I had given her as a wedding gift 5 years ago. I remember telling her, "So you can carry your dreams wherever life takes you." God help me, I meant that. She struggled to lift it out. The suitcase looked heavy, too heavy for clothes or books. She glanced around once toward the forest, once toward my porch, but I was hidden in shadow. Her movements were sharp, frantic. She staggered toward the edge of the lake, every step slower, heavier, as if she was fighting something inside herself. "Lara?" I finally called, my voice catching in my throat. She didn't turn. She swung the suitcase once, twice, then a third time with all her strength and hurled it into the lake. The splash shattered the silence. Birds took off from the reeds, wings slapping against the water. The suitcase bobbed for a second, then started to sink, the brown leather darkening as the cold lake swallowed it whole. Lara stood there, staring at it, trembling like she wanted to jump in after it, but couldn't. Then suddenly she turned, ran back to the SUV, and sped away so fast the taillights disappeared before the echo of the splash had faded. I stood frozen, gripping the railing, unable to breathe. What had she done? What was in that suitcase? The teacup tipped over and rolled off the porch, shattering on the ground, but I didn't notice. Something inside me snapped. I ran. My knees protested, my lungs burned, but I ran down the slope toward the water. The suitcase was still there, barely floating, half sunk near the reeds. The cold water bit into my legs as I waded in. My fingers closed around the handle, slick with mud. That's when I heard it, a faint, muffled cry from inside. My whole body went cold. "No, please, no," I whispered, dragging the heavy suitcase toward the shore. My hands shook as I pulled the zipper. It jammed once, then again. I tore at it with everything I had until it gave way. And there, inside, wrapped in a soaked blue blanket, was a baby. Pale, motionless, silent for one unbearable second, then a weak, broken gasp of air. He was alive. For a moment, I couldn't move. The sound of that tiny, struggling breath rooted me to the wet sand. Then, instinct took over, the kind I hadn't felt since the days I worked as a nurse 40 years ago. I scooped the baby into my arms, pressed him against my chest, and stumbled up the bank toward the house. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the wind rushing through the pines. Inside, I laid him on a clean towel on the kitchen counter. His skin was ice cold, his lips nearly purple. I grabbed the phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. My voice came out in sobs more than words. "There's a baby," I gasped. He's not breathing right. I found him in a lake, in a suitcase. Please hurry." The operator's voice was calm, steady, guiding me like a lighthouse through chaos. "Ma'am, listen to me. Gently tilt the baby's head back. Check his mouth for any obstruction. Do you feel air?" "Yes, barely," I said, trembling. "Okay, wrap him in something dry, keep him warm. Paramedics are on the way. Stay on the line." I grabbed a blanket from the dryer, still faintly warm from earlier that morning. and wrapped the baby tightly. I rubbed his back gently, whispering prayers I didn't even realize I remembered. "Come on, sweetheart. Come on. Breathe for me." When I heard the distant wail of sirens, tears flooded my eyes. The baby let out a faint whimper, weak but alive. I pressed my cheek to his tiny forehead. "You're okay now. You're safe." Minutes later, red and blue lights flashed across the porch. The door burst open, and 2 paramedics rushed in, a young woman and an older man. "Where's the infant?" the woman asked sharply. I handed him over, feeling my knees go weak as soon as his small body left my hands. The paramedics worked quickly, checking his pulse, wrapping him in heated blankets, placing a tiny oxygen mask over his face. "We need to move," the woman said. "Possible hypothermia and aspiration." "I'm coming with you," I said without hesitation. They didn't argue. Inside the ambulance, I sat pressed against the cold metal wall, watching the baby as the paramedic monitored his heart rate. The machines beeped, steady and fragile. "How did you find him?" the older paramedic asked. "I saw my daughter-in-law," I whispered. "She threw a suitcase into the lake. I didn't know God. I didn't know what was in it." He looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to believe it, but he didn't question further. The hospital lights were blinding when we arrived. They whisked the baby through swinging doors, shouting terms I remembered from years past. Hypothermic, cyanotic, shallow respiration. I stood there in the corridor, soaked to the skin, unable to move. A police officer approached me, notebook in hand. She was tall, early 40s, with alert gray eyes and a calm but firm tone. "Ma'am, I'm Detective Renee Calder, Benton County Sheriff's Office. I need to ask you a few questions." I nodded, still shivering. "Please, just tell me he's going to live." "The doctors are doing everything they can," she said gently. "But I need to understand. You're saying your daughter-in-law threw a suitcase into the lake?" "Yes," I said. "I saw her with my own eyes." "And your son? Where is he?" My throat tightened. "He's gone. 6 months now. They said it was an accident." Detective Calder's eyes sharpened slightly. "An accident?" I nodded slowly. "A car crash. She survived. He didn't." Calder wrote something down, then looked up again. "We'll find out what really happened." As she walked away, I stared through the glass wall into the neonatal unit where the baby lay under soft lights, wires trailing from his tiny body. I didn't know who he truly was yet, but I already knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened that night at Crystal Lake, I was never going to let him face this world alone again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hospital waiting room with a paper cup of cold coffee in my hands, watching the rain streak the glass. Every time a nurse passed, my heart jumped, hoping for news. Around 3 a.m, one finally came, a kind-faced woman in blue scrubs with a name tag that read Marisol Vega. "He's stable for now," she said softly. "We warmed his body temperature and cleared the water from his lungs. He's fighting, that little one." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Thank God. Marisol smiled faintly. "You can see him, but only for a minute." Inside the neonatal intensive care unit, machines hummed in a rhythm that felt like borrowed hope. The baby was wrapped in blankets, his chest rising and falling with each small breath. I touched the clear plastic of the incubator, whispering, "You're safe now, sweetheart." When I stepped back into the hallway, Detective Calder was waiting. She looked tired, her hair pulled into a messy bun, a folder in her hands. "Mrs. Barrett, we're running DNA tests," she said. "DNA tests? Why?" "It's standard in possible criminal cases involving infants. We'll compare the child's DNA with state records, just a precaution." I nodded, not really understanding what they expected to find. All I could think about was that tiny body in that big machine. By morning, the waiting room was bright with weak sunlight. Calder returned, but this time her face wasn't neutral, it was pale, her jaw tight. She sat across from me and placed a paper on the table. "We got the results back," she said quietly. "The baby is biologically related to you." I blinked. "Related? How?" 25% match. That means..." She hesitated. "He's your grandson, Mrs. Barrett. Your son Evan's child." For a moment, The world tilted. The walls seemed to close in, and the air turned heavy. "That can't be right," I whispered. "Evan never said anything about Lara being pregnant?" Calder finished. "That's what we thought too, but it fits the timeline. She was about 8 weeks along when he died." 8 weeks. 2 months before the crash. My hands trembled as I pressed them to my face. She knew. She hid it. Calder leaned forward. "We also reopened your son's case. We requested a new mechanical inspection on the car. The original report called it driver error in bad weather, but the new analysis shows evidence of brake tampering." I stared at her, unblinking. "Brake tampering?" "Someone cut through the line and resealed it with adhesive to delay failure. It wasn't an accident, Mrs. Barrett." My breath caught in my throat. The hospital hallway blurred around me. Lara's face flashed in my mind, the wild eyes, the way she hurled that suitcase into the lake, the silence before she sped away. "She killed him," I said, my voice shaking. "She killed my son and tried to kill his child." Calder didn't answer, but the look in her eyes told me she believed it too. "We've issued a statewide alert," she said. "No credit card activity, no phone records. It's like she vanished, but we'll find her." I turned toward the NICU window where the baby slept, wrapped in light. His chest rose and fell proof of life that shouldn't have existed. "He has his father's eyes," I whispered, "and she tried to drown them." Marisol came back with a small smile. "He's strong. You can visit again soon." As she walked away, I pressed my palm to the glass, my reflection overlapping with his. My voice came out quiet but certain. "You're my blood, little one. You survived what no one should. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to make sure you never have to fight alone again." The next morning, I found myself in an office that smelled faintly of disinfectant and bureaucracy. Across the desk sat a young woman in a gray suit with a tablet balanced on her knees. Her nameplate read, "April Donnelly, Child Services." Her smile was polite but distant, the kind of smile people wear when they're about to tell you something you won't like. "Mrs. Barrett," she began, "I understand this has been traumatic, but since the child's biological mother is missing and his father is deceased, the state must assume temporary custody until we can determine a guardian." "Temporary custody?" I repeated, my voice thin. "He's my grandson. You can't just take him from me." April's tone softened, but her eyes didn't. "I know you have an emotional connection, but legally you need to be evaluated, background check, medical exam, home inspection. It's standard procedure." "I was a nurse for 30 years, I said, leaning forward. "I raised my son alone after my husband died. I know how to take care of a baby." "I don't doubt that," she replied gently, "but we still have to follow protocol. The child's safety comes first." Her words stung. I wanted to scream that I was the one who had dragged him out of the freezing water, that I was the reason he was still breathing. But instead, I nodded stiffly. "How long will it take?" "Normally, 6 to 8 weeks, she said. "During that time, the infant will remain in state custody under medical supervision." 6 to 8 weeks. It might as well have been a lifetime. I felt something crumble inside me. That night, I went home for the first time since that terrible evening. The house felt emptier than ever. Evan's pictures lined the hallway, the little boy in a raincoat holding a frog, the teenager with braces, the young man in a suit on his wedding day, smiling beside the woman who had destroyed everything. I sat on the floor in front of the fireplace and cried until my body ached. Somewhere out there, that same woman was hiding, maybe sleeping soundly, while the baby she tried to kill lay under hospital lights. No, I couldn't let that be his story. The next day, I drove back to the hospital and asked to speak with April again. "Tell me what I have to do," I said. "All of it. I'll do every test, every interview, every course. I'm not letting that child grow up with strangers." She blinked, almost surprised. "That's admirable, Mrs. Barrett. I'll start your file right away." And so began my war with the system. I filled out endless forms, submitted fingerprints, answered questions about my finances and health, even my mental stability. I attended a child care class at the community center, 15 young mothers and one grandmother who hadn't changed a diaper in decades. Each night, I went back to the hospital. The nurses let me sit beside the incubator while I hummed the lullaby I used to sing to Evan. The baby's chest rose and fell with tiny breaths that sounded like forgiveness. Marisol often joined me on her rounds. "He seems calmer when you're here," she said once. I smiled faintly. "He knows me," I whispered. "He feels it." One evening, Detective Calder stopped by. "We traced Lara's financials," she said grimly. $250,000 from Evans Life Insurance, wired to an offshore account 3 months ago. She planned this. I stared at the floor. She thought money was everything, but she's about to learn she underestimated a grandmother with nothing left to lose. Calder's eyes softened. "We'll find her, Helen. I promise." When she left, I looked at the baby through the glass and pressed my hand to my heart. "They're all fighting for you now, little one," I murmured. "But no one will ever fight harder than I will." 2 weeks passed in a blur of hospital visits and paperwork. Between interviews with social workers and detective updates, I spent every spare moment beside the incubator. The baby had grown stronger, his skin pink now, his breathing steady. They still called him Baby Boy Barrett on the hospital chart, but I had quietly given him a name, Noah. It felt right, calm, resilient, like someone who had already survived a flood. One rainy afternoon, while waiting for yet another home inspection appointment, I decided to clean Evan's old study. The room had been untouched since the week of his funeral, his books stacked neatly, his work desk still holding the coffee mug he'd left behind. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. I opened the drawers, sorting through documents and photographs, until my hand brushed something at the back of the lowest drawer, a small brown leather journal. It took me a second to recognize his handwriting, Evan's careful, slightly slanted letters. My throat tightened as I flipped through the first pages. Most entries were ordinary projects at work, fishing plans, small notes to himself. But as I turned closer to the last months of his life, the tone changed. Something's wrong with Lara. She's been distant, secretive, keeps checking the bank statements when she thinks I'm asleep. Another entry, dated 2 months later, found a pregnancy test in the trash. She said it's not hers, but I know she's lying. Why would she hide something like that? The next pages came faster, each one darker than the last. She says she doesn't want the baby, said it would ruin everything. I told her we'll make it work. She didn't answer. And then the line that made my knees go weak. I changed my will today. Everything will go to the baby, not to Lara. She'll hate me for it, but I have to protect our child. I pressed my hand against my mouth, reading through tears. The final entry was written the night before his death. She threatened me, said I'd regret crossing her. "I'm going to talk to Mom tomorrow. Maybe she'll know what to do." Tomorrow. He never made it to tomorrow. I took the journal straight to Detective Calder's office. She read each page in silence, her face growing harder with every word. When she finished, she exhaled slowly. "This changes everything," she said. "It proves motive, money, resentment, control. We'll reopen the case formally as a homicide." I nodded, clutching my coat tightly. "Find her, please." Calder called in a forensic team to re-examine Evan's car, and 2 days later, she showed up at my doorstep with news. "We found the mechanic," she said. "A man named Carlos Ruiz. Lara paid him cash to tamper with the brakes. At first he denied everything, but when we showed him the payment records from her account, he confessed." My stomach turned. So she killed him for money, and then tried to kill the baby to keep it all. Calder nodded grimly. "She's facing first-degree murder and attempted murder when we catch her." I sank into a chair, my hands trembling. She carried that child for 9 months, and the first thing she did was try to drown him. Calder's voice softened. "We've put out alerts across state lines. She can't hide forever." That night, back in the hospital, I sat beside Noah and whispered, "Your daddy knew. He tried to protect you. He even wrote it down. And now it's my turn." Marisol checked the monitors and smiled faintly. "He's getting stronger. Soon he won't need these tubes anymore." I stroked the baby's tiny hand through the opening in the incubator. "That's good," I said softly, "because once you're strong enough, we're going home. And I'm never letting anyone take you away again." It was close to midnight when the phone rang. The sound sliced through the silence of the house like a blade. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of paperwork for Noah's custody petition, my eyes blurring over the endless forms. I almost didn't answer, but some deep, unshakable instinct told me to pick up. "Mrs. Barrett," a woman's voice said, calm, cold, too familiar. My breath caught. "Laura?" A pause, then a soft laugh, low and bitter. "You sound surprised." "Where are you?" I demanded, my hand gripping the receiver so tightly it hurt. "Doesn't matter where I am," she said. "What matters is what you have that belongs to me." My stomach dropped. "You mean the baby?" "My son," she corrected sharply. "And yes, I want him back." I froze. "You tried to kill him. You left him to drown. He's lucky to be alive." "That wasn't supposed to happen," she snapped, her voice suddenly shaking. "I was scared. I wasn't thinking clearly. But I'm better now. I want him back, and everything that's his. You understand me?" "His," I whispered. "You mean the money." A low, humorless chuckle came from the other end of the line. "Oh, you're not as slow as I thought. The money Evan left, the trust, the insurance. I know it's all going to the baby. And you, saintly little mother-in-law, are probably playing guardian angel. But let's be honest, you can't raise a newborn at your age. You'll die before he starts kindergarten." I forced myself to stay calm, though my pulse thudded in my ears. I needed her to keep talking. "What do you want, Laura?" "I want my son and every cent tied to his name," she said flatly. "You'll bring both to me. Tomorrow night, midnight, the old lumber mill by Crystal Lake. Come alone." "You're insane," I whispered. "Maybe, but you'll do it," she replied. "Because if you don't, I'll tell the police you kidnapped him. I'll tell them you made up the whole story about the suitcase. You have no proof. My word against yours, and we both know who they'll believe." I clenched my jaw to keep my voice from breaking. "You're threatening me, Laura." "Oh, I'm just giving you a choice," she said softly. "Show up, or lose him forever." Then the line went dead. My entire body shook. For a few seconds, I sat frozen, staring at the phone. Then I realized what I had to do. I had recorded the call. My phone had been on voice memo the whole time. My hands were trembling as I hit save and called Detective Calder. When she arrived 30 minutes later, her hair still damp from the rain, I played her the recording. Calder's expression hardened. "This is exactly what we needed. We'll set a trap." "A trap?" "You'll go to the meeting. You'll wear a wire. We'll have snipers on the ridge and a tactical unit behind the mill. The moment she shows up, we move." My throat went dry. "You want me to face her?" "We'll be watching you the whole time. I promise," Calder said. "We can't risk losing her again." I looked toward the living room where Noah's tiny crib sat beside the couch, his breathing soft and even. My heart twisted. If this goes wrong— "It won't," Calder said firmly. "You're not alone in this, Helen." But when the house grew quiet again after the officers left, I stood beside the crib and watched my grandson sleep. His tiny fingers twitched. His lips pursed like he was dreaming. I brushed his forehead with my fingertips and whispered, "Your mother won't hurt you again. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'll make sure of that." Then I kissed him goodnight and went to pack the bag that would decide everything. The next night, Oregon felt colder than it should have in late October. A thin fog rolled in from the lake, curling through the trees like smoke. The moon hung low above the water, pale and watchful. I drove alone down the old road toward the abandoned Crystal Ridge sawmill, the same road where I'd once seen Laura's SUV vanish into the night. My car's headlights cut through the mist, revealing the crumbling structure ahead, a skeleton of timber and rusted metal that had been silent for 20 years. Detective Calder's voice crackled softly in my earpiece. "We've got eyes on the perimeter, Helen. Stay calm. She won't see us." My hands were slick on the steering wheel. The baby carrier on the passenger seat was empty except for a bundle of blankets. My stomach twisted every time I glanced at it. I had told myself it was just a decoy, that Noah was safe at the hospital under police protection, but still, I couldn't shake the instinct to check on him. I parked near the loading ramp, turned off the engine, and stepped out. The night swallowed me whole. The only sounds were the slow drip of water from the eaves and the whisper of wind through broken windows. Then I heard footsteps. Lara stepped out of the shadows, wearing a black coat and a hood pulled low. Her face was thinner, her eyes sunken but sharp, glittering with something between anger and madness. "You actually came," she said, her voice echoing slightly off the walls. "I didn't have a choice," I said, holding the carrier close to my chest. "He deserves a chance to live." She smirked, tilting her head. "How touching. The grieving mother playing hero." I took a slow step back. "You killed Evan." Her lips twitched. "You think I don't know what it's like to lose everything? He betrayed me. He was going to take the money, leave me with nothing. He changed his will for that child." "He was protecting his family from you," I said quietly. "Family?" she spat. "That baby was a curse. You don't understand, none of you ever did. I gave everything to Evan, and he replaced me with you and that thing." "His name is Noah," I said, my voice shaking, "and he's your son." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, fear, regret, something human. Then it vanished. She pulled a pistol from her coat pocket. "Give him to me," she hissed. "Now." I froze, staring at the gun pointed at my chest. My thumb grazed the small panic button hidden inside my sleeve. I pressed it. "Don't do this," I whispered. "You don't have to run anymore." She took a step forward. "You don't get to tell me what I have to do." A single tear slipped down my cheek as the sound of movement rustled outside, the soft crunch of boots, the shifting of branches. She heard it too. "Police!" a voice shouted from the dark. "Drop the weapon!" Lara spun around, panic flashing across her face. She fired once the bullet grazed my shoulder, searing pain tearing through me. I stumbled backward, clutching the wound as shouts echoed through the mill. Red laser dots cut through the fog. "Weapon down, now." Lara screamed, backing toward the riverbank, the gun trembling in her hand. "You ruined everything!" "Lara, it's over!" Calder's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Drop it!" For one tense moment, time froze. Then Lara's shoulders sagged. The gun slipped from her fingers, clattering to the ground. She sank to her knees, sobbing as officers swarmed her. Calder rushed to my side, pressing a hand over my shoulder wound. "You're okay. We've got you." I looked past her at Lara being led away in handcuffs, her face hollow, her eyes empty. Somewhere in the distance, the fog began to lift, revealing the lake glimmering under the moonlight. "It's over," I whispered, though part of me knew it never really would be. But at least now, Noah's story could finally begin where ours had almost ended. Winter came early to Crystal Lake that year. The trees stood bare and silent, their branches dusted with frost. By then, the news of Lara's arrest had reached every corner of Oregon, woman convicted of husband's murder and attempted infanticide. It was all over the papers for a week, and then, as always, the world moved on. But for me and Noah, it was only the beginning. The trial lasted 3 months. I sat through every hearing, my arm still sore from the bullet wound. The courtroom smelled faintly of pine cleaner and cold coffee. Lara looked smaller somehow, her arrogance replaced by exhaustion. When the prosecutor played the recording of her phone call, the threats, the demands, the admission that she wasn't thinking clearly, she closed her eyes and didn't open them again. Detective Calder testified about the brake tampering and the offshore accounts. The mechanic's confession sealed the verdict. The jury took less than 2 hours to decide. When the judge read life without parole, the gavel echoed like thunder. I didn't feel triumph, only a strange, quiet grief. No one truly wins when a family destroys itself. Afterward, Calder found me in the hallway. "You kept your promise," she said softly. I nodded. Evan would have wanted it this way. Months later, after endless evaluations and home visits, a letter arrived from the Department of Human Services. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sentence that made me cry harder than I had in years. Petition for adoption approved. Noah came home on a bright March morning. He was heavier now, cheeks full, eyes curious. The nurses hugged me goodbye, and Marisol whispered, "He's a lucky boy." "No," I told her, smiling through tears. "I'm the lucky one." Our life slowly found rhythm. I painted the old nursery pale yellow, the same color I used when Evan was born. The house that once echoed with loneliness filled again with laughter, tiny footsteps, and lullabies. I planted a tree by the lake, a young maple, its roots deep in the soil where everything had begun. Sometimes I took Noah to the water's edge. I'd hold him close and tell him stories about his father, the boy who loved fishing, who used to race paper boats across the water, who dreamed of raising a family right there on that shore. On Noah's 5th birthday, our neighbors gathered in the yard. There were balloons, homemade cupcakes, and the laughter of children running through the autumn air. When everyone sang happy birthday, I looked toward the lake, golden under the setting sun, and imagined Evan standing there, smiling. Later that night, when Noah was asleep, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the moon's reflection ripple across the water. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel like a stranger. I whispered softly into the wind, "We kept your promise, Evan. He's safe. He's loved." The world around me was still, but I could feel life breathing again, strong, steady, forgiving. Some people believe age weakens you. They're wrong. It sharpens you. It teaches you that love isn't just a feeling, it's an unbreakable vow. Evil tried to drown innocence that night in Crystal Lake, but love pulled it back to the surface. And as long as I draw breath, that love will never sink again.